Hey, everybody. This is Area Code Batavia, a podcast about what it means to belong in Batavia, Illinois. I'm your host, Richard Clark. Today on the podcast, I talk to musician and pizza mogul, Chris Otepka. Chris is a Batavia native. He was born in Batavia, and he grew up in Batavia. But he ultimately left to tour the world with a rock band called Troubled Hubble. It wasn't until years later, when he was asked to help open Riverside Pizza and Pub locations in Elgin and Batavia, that he decided to come back. I wanted to know what it was like to return home after something like that. How does your experience touring and living somewhere else affect your perspective on what is essentially a more simple, maybe even mundane life here? Here's my conversation with Chris Otepka.
I'm on a pizza break from here, so ready to break the pizza break.
You've been taking a pizza break?
I mean, it's been...
You're probably sick of pizza.
I'm not. Certainly not.
Okay.
It's been a week since I've had any Riverside food, which is...
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good amount of time.
What are you doing? You're fasting or something?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was out of town for a few days.
Yeah.
It just hasn't timed out, and I'm waiting to return to it with like the right thing. Our pizza of the month is always awesome.
Yeah.
And right now it's the cheeseburger pizza.
Yes.
And so I think that's what my return is going to be. I like to plan the return.
It's so good. You're meticulous and intentional about the return.
The same thing last
when you go out of town, basically.
Yes, if I'm forced to step away for a few days from the food, then the return has got to be, something exciting, more exciting. Last month, our Cinco de Mayo, the Mexican pizza, was after a few days of no Riverside food, coming right back in strong with the pizza of the month last month, and it was affirming. It was nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like that. That's got to be a good feeling to like. Man, it's so direct. It's so concrete and direct. You know when you eat it, it's good food. I don't have that kind of distance to the work that I do. You know what I mean? There's no way I could listen to my podcast and have an objective, I guess it's still subjective, but like a real opinion about it. Yeah,
I think you have to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
With your job and with your art. And when it's still exciting. You got to keep it exciting. And so pizza of the month.
So you said that you and your friends started Riverside in Batavia. Is that right?
The evolution was my brother-in-law probably 11, 12 years ago. He was running a UPS store up in St. Charles and would go downtown St. Charles for lunch when the first Riverside opened. Yeah. He would post up there, got to know the owner, Steve, at the first Riverside, just right across the street from the Arcada Theater. And my brother-in-law went to, culinary school and enjoys pubs. He's got some British heritage, and he wanted to open up his own restaurant. I was living in Washington State at the time. I moved out there for music, and so, it was 2015 when he just so happened to befriend a few of my high school classmates while being in the area. He married my sister, and being from Batavia, we've got mutual friends. So he befriended people I'd known my whole life, completely separate from me, and got talking to Steve at Riverside 1. And then within a year or so of them being open and being buds, they wanted to open up a second location. And so that's when he called me, and that was in 2016. It was like January of 2016. Yeah. And said, hey, move home. We found a location. We're going to open up a restaurant.
Was this pre-planned? He called you at Washington State to say, I'm just doing this. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. I had been coming home for holidays, and, in the time that I was living out in Washington, my 3 sisters all had a few kids, and I became an uncle. And so I was feeling kind of isolated and distant out there. And so it was really exciting for me to say, heck yeah. And pretty much within 2 weeks had put everything that I could fit in my minivan and drove home. And, I lived with my parents. I lived with Mike, my brother-in-law, and his family. And we got this location in South Elgin, second Riverside location. It used to be a Amici's Clubhouse. And when that went out of business, I remember they sent me, it was Mike and Brian Panazzo, who is one of the owners here and in South Elgin. They sent me a picture of the old Amici's Clubhouse through the front windows before they had keys. And it was just kind of a inert, stagnant restaurant with a very strange color scheme. And there was a stage in there and a disco ball and a bunch of old tables and a layer of dust on everything. And we're going to turn this into our restaurant. Opening the second one with a pretty small budget, we ended up gutting the place ourselves, removing the stage, opening up the floor plan, repainting all of the chairs, restaining all of the chair seat pads, and doing a lot of it ourselves. And so it happened real organically. So then within a couple of years of that restaurant being open and the vibes being really good, Mike, Brian, myself, Justin Musgrave, who's a Batavia lifer, musician, also in my graduating class with Brian, and we started looking around for other locations to expand. We looked in Glen Ellen, Aurora, and this was a Walgreens that had gone out of business.
I remember that now. I feel like, how long ago was that?
Oh God, are we 5 years old now? So
it is crazy to me.
We opened right as the pandemic was setting on. So we were open for part of a year, and then we're just pickup and delivery. And the pickup and delivery, I think, really helped us establish a pretty faithful clientele when we were just kind of working out of the kitchen in the back of the restaurant. And my job evolved really quickly for the pandemic, just being a hiring manager and taking on drivers and bussers and training people. The definition of my job just changed drastically. Okay,
my question is, when he felt the need to call you, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how that, there's clearly like a best friend thing, right? Like you guys were just really good friends.
Absolutely.
And you had you talked about franchising restaurants or something beforehand, or what? How did that had this come up before?
I don't think that we had spent a lot of time together at pubs, at bars.
You knew you liked them.
Yeah.
So then why did he need you?
I've never stopped to wonder that, other than, wow, that's a really good question. I suppose I should feel flattered in just like considering that.
Yeah. What were you brought on to do? What was your role at that time?
Repaint chairs.
Okay. The handy stuff.
I still to this day like to consider myself utility man.
Okay. That makes sense.
Helping manage it. It was just the three of us and a few servers and a few bartenders, but we were answering the phones, running the deliveries, doing the pickups, trying to build a core kitchen staff and to just establish like the good vibe that is still here today. Because when I got back here, 10 years ago now, it was Mike and Brian, the two main owners, who had contacted me and brought me on. And it wasn't until I got into the South Elgin location did I turn around and there's a long-haired, goofy dude who's also cleaning chairs. And it took a second, but it's a guy I've known for 40 years. It's Justin Musgrave. And it's like, you're involved in this too? And Brian called me too. And
oh, wow.
Justin had moved up from Florida with his wife to do the same thing. And so we came thousands of miles to just convene in South Elgin. And it was so, so wonderfully exciting. I had no service industry experience. Yeah. Justin and Brian had worked at the first Riverside, at Bar Louie, at a few other restaurants through their lives. And Justin is, Brian as well, fantastic bartenders, just really smart people and know the ins and outs of all the service industry. I had just played rock music in bars and restaurants. I had not really.
Is that, what brought you to Washington State?
I was touring very heavily from the year 2000 until 2006. I didn't have a core band. It was more solo.
Can I ask what year you graduated?
I graduated in 98 from Batavia.
Okay, got it.
I'm old.
I'm stunned because you seem younger than me, and I graduated in 2000.
Oh, awesome. So, from Batavia?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've been here about 7 years. I've been here 7 years. So I grew up in Southeast Alabama.
Oh, awesome. I thought
I graduated from there. And
Southeast Alabama.
Yeah.
All right. Nice. My band would love to go and play Birmingham and Huntsville.
Man. Birmingham is great. It's a great town to play, I think.
Oh my God. We would go and play this DIY venue called Cave 9, and it was just the most insane fun, just a wild scene.
You know what's crazy is I was just listening, of all things, random. I was just listening to a interview with John Mulaney, and
cool.
someone asked him what's his favorite place to perform, and he said Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow.
Of all things, I could not believe it.
Wow. Yeah, great experiences there.
Yeah.
And the second record from Hubble that came out in 2004.
Your band's name is Troubled Hubble.
Troubled
for people.
Hubble, yeah.
Troubled Hubble. Yeah.
Oh, we're doing this now. We're going.
Oh, we've been doing it.
Okay.
That's incredible that you just
Okay.
thought we were sitting here having this
We were
conversation.
establishing.
I love it. There's
All
no
right.
difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dothan, Alabama, Mobile,
Oh my
Alabama.
God.
Yeah.
So when I say Southeast Alabama,
Yeah.
an hour from Dothan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Dothan is where we would go if we needed anything. If we wanted to see a movie, if we wanted to go to Water World, the water park, whatever, if we want to do anything fun or go to the mall, that's where we would go.
Okay.
Sorry, what were you saying about
Not
Dothan?
at all. It's Alabama has a lot of very special meaning to me, and there's a university in Mobile that would invite us down to play the Satori Coffee House, and
Nice.
I'm always looking forward to going back there. I can't remember how we got off on the Alabama tangent. Oh yeah, that's where you graduated
Touring and
high
stuff
school.
or something. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Yes, that's it.
So Dothan, Alabama, a bookstore a cafe that we would play down there. Yeah, the formative years. A lot of inspiration for future Hubble stuff after
Yeah.
that as well.
That's cool. And Troubled Hubble was signed to Lookout Records.
That's right.
Which
Yeah.
that stuck out to me because isn't that what Green Day was signed to?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like into their original albums back in like Kerplunk and all that stuff.
There are some lookout heads out there for sure, because they did a 7-inch series, just some of the early punk 7 inches that are sought after, big, highly collectible items now. But yes, Green Day put out Plunk and 14,000 Slappy Hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was, from there that they did Dookie. But the Gilman Street venue has been like resurrected from what I understand. It was cool to meet them. Hubble got touring really hard and got on the radar of a lot of college on CMJ and college radio promotions, and that would bring, back in the day, that was kind of the network that you would. There was no social media. There wasn't any sort of digital contact. People would see you live, and your music would come out on physical. It was it was a wonderful time. So to have met. I mean, we got to play with Ted Leo, who was on Lookout.
The Pharmacy? Is that right?
Yeah, Ted Leo and the Pharmacists. Yeah. They were so awesome.
Yeah.
And we got to play with Pansy Division, who are on Lookout. And so, we were hitting the radar of these people. And then we played a CMJ showcase where a few labels came out and a manager came out and a booking agent came out.
Stressful?
These people came to see us. And not really. No, I don't ever remember being stressed.
Oh.
Not until towards the end when the music industry was switching from physical to digital, and
tough time.
it started to really kind of feel like it was getting out of our hands. We were so DIY for so long, and booking our own shows and printing our own shirts, and just really in control of our own destiny, that when we handed our lives over to the label and to the management and booking, that's when it might have gotten a little stressful, but certainly not a stressful memory. It was thrilling. We met, Molly Newman, who was in Bratmobile, and she was running the label with Chris Applegren, who was in a few old bands that were always just fantastical, you'd never thought you would meet these people and connected to all these really cool bands. And
nice. So you graduated in 98, and then 2 years later you were signed to Lookout. Is that right?
Well, I graduated in 98. 2 years later, we were signed to the Magic Spot Productions out of River Grove. And then a year from then, after that, we were signed to Latest Flame Records out of Milwaukee. And they helped us with Penturbia. And I brought this old Penturbia poster to just show you our we considered ourselves from Batavia. This is an old
Oh,
poster.
is that
was on
Fermilab? Yeah.
That's Fermilab
cool.
building was on the cover of our
I love that.
latest Flame record. Yeah, just to show you how much we would say we were from Fermilab. We wouldn't say Batavia. We were
Right.
banned from Fermilab.
Well, at least you didn't say Chicago. Sometimes you said
Sometimes
Chicago.
we'd have to. Sometimes
What's Fermilab? Oh, it's around Chicago or in Chicago.
Yeah, no, it's a particle physics lab. That's where we all work, and that's where we all met. When really it was a movie theater, and we all had first jobs over at the Randall Theater when it opened in '96.
Fermilab was part of the lore.
Absolutely,
basically. That's so good.
Yeah, still will be, at times for sure. It's sometimes it is just easier to say we're from Fermilab. So we've never really made sure that was okay with the scientists over there. We just like to consider ourselves part of it.
It just makes them seem cooler, basically.
Because of our name, we would go out and play DC and Huntsville and down in Florida, and NASA scientists would come out and see us and introduce themselves.
I just realized that it's a science reference, probably. Trouble Hubble.
So we met some aeronautical engineers and some people who, for all we know, are a part of the Space Force now. But in DC, there would be scientists that would come out and show up at our shows. We liked to group ourselves in with the science scene for some reason. I think, lyrical content, that's just kind of what kept ideas flowing, was just the wonder of all things natural. And
I talked to a lot of people who grew up in Batavia, left Batavia, and came back. Were you itching to leave Batavia, which I think is a natural thing?
Oh, that was the question that you had asked earlier about moving to Washington. So after 06, after Hubble broke up, I wasn't tethered, and I could tour out of anywhere. It was always great touring out of the Midwest. That was one of the benefits of, being a band from Fermilab, Chicago, was that you had access to both coasts, equidistant, and you could, cover a lot of ground.
Totally.
I have a friend from Batavia that I grew up with, Carly James. She was in my class as well, who opened up a print shop out in Washington, and they needed help expanding out there. And so I, like I said, had nothing holding me down here. After Hubble broke up, I spent a few years solo, moved to Washington, and then joined another band called Clem Snide from Nashville. And so I would just satellite from here to Washington to Nashville, and would be on the road half of the year.
So interesting to me. So you're doing music all this time, but you also seem to be the guy people call to start businesses, local businesses.
Utility man.
Yeah.
I love it. I love really, only in my older years have I realized the joy that you get putting others first, and, helping and being of help, and being of service. And
because you are essentially a front man in all your music career.
Yes. I've always enjoyed the rhythm of words. I was a drummer for a band in high school.
Okay.
And then into college, my first year at Columbia in Chicago, right out of high school, which I didn't even finish my first year, but in that time joined a few Chicago punk bands, and I was drumming for these bands, and, loved them, but there was something more. And so being a drummer in a band really inspired me to want to write my own songs and to make songs that would be fun to drum to, that had, a little bit more thoughtful lyrics. And that would also get people moving and dancing. And that was a big part of early Trouble Hubble stuff, was, our rhythm section of Nate and Andrew Lantham knew how to get people moving. And I loved rap music and folky, wordy music as well. And so it just all really meshed well.
The dichotomy between those two things is really interesting. I mean, you're like frontman, center. Everyone, really, your band is serving you in some ways. I mean, that's an overstatement a bit, but I think in general, the point is to support the person up front. And now you're doing more behind the scenes, and you're saying you like serving people and supporting people. Is that like a reaction to having done that all those years?
The band was, we would approach, I guess, more dark or morose topics, but with a fun and silly spin. Mm-hmm. And so it was just kind of trying to find the positive in all of, the negatives, and to lift people up. just kind of came naturally.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm not a vibe cop, but I like to enforce good vibes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your whole life before you graduated, you were in Batavia, right?
Yes.
What was the first time you felt like you belonged in Batavia?
The first time that I feel like I'm not answering all these questions for you very directly, but where
it happens. My whole job is to make you.
We're sitting here in this location that was the grocery store when I grew up. This was our jewel back in the early 80s. You know, we got in here and when it was the old Walgreens, and we gutted this place, and the drop ceiling was, 10 feet above our heads.
Yeah.
We had no idea that this barrel ceiling was here.
Yeah.
But I remember walking through just there at the end of the bar and getting struck with this memory of an open, like, frozen foods cooler that was in one of the aisles in the Jewel right here. And as like a 7-8-year-old kid, just scraping my fingernails along the frost that would form in this cooler. I think the first time that I felt like I belonged here, I gotta say it was probably fishing on the river, at a young age. My friends and I, the bike trail, the Fox River Trail, we were just so blessed to have that, and to ride your bike half mile away from your house and feel like you're in a totally different world. But growing up with access to the river, sure, I guess I felt like I belonged here. And then, as you leave for college after high school, and nowhere feels exactly like home, and coming back home and still feeling that connection, you leave to just affirm the feelings about your hometown. And
that's why you left?
No. It just.
But it was part of it.
It definitely.
That's so interesting, because when I left my hometown, it was to affirm my feelings against my hometown.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. You hear, both sides.
Which didn't really happen. You know what I mean? I was like, changed my mind after a while.
Okay. Yeah. You hear definitely both sides of it. I can't wait to get out of here, and I can't wait to come back. Yeah. Even just driving down here today through downtown, I remember all of the old stores, like we're sitting in the old Jewel and the pharmacy around the corner that's not there, and all of the old establishments right on downtown Wilson here. And I'm very fortunate to have grown up in Batavia. Yeah. And I know a lot of more people here than anywhere else, and that's saying a lot, because I've made a lot of contacts around the country and the globe. But yeah, I still feel like I belong here. When exactly the feeling set in, I grew up in this. I grew up in the Saratoga neighborhood, just right down Wilson here, and in a cul-de-sac. And every one of my neighbors was my friend, and it was before the Georgetown neighborhood townhomes went up. In the late '80s, we had all the wild, undeveloped land. And we call them the Hilly Hills. They're just like, we'd go ride our bikes, and it was heaven. It was wonderful.
There's like a interesting dynamic that you even mentioned before we started this. Like, I think you said something like, not a lot of people know. I think it was your email to me. Like, not a lot of people know I've like done music and toured around the world and stuff. That's like a weird feeling, right? Like to come back to a place where people don't know that, not because it's like, do you know who I am kind of thing, but it's like, let me say it a different way. Do you know who I am? It's that kind of thing. Do you really, like, I'm someone who likes to be seen, right? Like, I like people to understand where I'm coming from and who I am. And sometimes it's hard when I'll go back to my hometown, or even just talk to anyone about what I do or what I'm passionate about. And they'll be like, what's a podcast? And so there's that disconnect of like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, they know who you are as a kid. They know probably more about who you are, but they don't know this, like, really specific, probably important thing about you.
Cool question.
I didn't ask a question, but I tried to, but I couldn't get one. I couldn't get there, but I'm glad you've got an answer to it.
Just put the inquisitive inflection at the end of any statement.
Exactly.
So I've never thought of it like that. It certainly doesn't bum me out. And if, someone isn't aware of my creative life, I like to live all parts of my life with that kind of creative mindset. And if I get to know somebody well enough, then that's when you get to say, and art, like,
right.
and like, there's all this cool stuff and we share this. And also, I don't know how not to make art or, and I'm not going to silence that part of me or put it on any back burner. I try to incorporate it in my work and social life, whether or not I'm jamming or writing. And, people's attention spans, especially these days, are so much shorter that you don't necessarily get the time with people on the surface and in passing and in the restaurants to ensure that everyone's doing good, enjoying themselves, feeling good, and then, also share your entire creative pursuance and story and things that you've produced. So I feel like if I were to think of it that way or have that on the front of my brain, then I'd be setting myself up to be kind of let down.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking about the creative life and how I share that with people, but it's a relationship. I think like anything, sometimes you're really jiving with your art. Sometimes, you're calling it to see if it's still there. Sometimes it's pulling you. Sometimes it's pushing you.
Yeah.
You just have to navigate that relationship. And I think that in meeting people and whether you're talking about it or not, it's still in motion. And I've never considered it. I don't know. I guess I've never felt that it was, if you're going to know me, that it's not
like a core part of knowing you. It's the specifics. Yeah, I see what you're saying. There's these abstract things that are part of your personality, but how that plays out in different ways are almost incidental to that in some way or something.
Yes.
In terms of knowing who you are.
And also like trusting that if this is to be shared or if people do want to know more, then they will. And if people want to know me on that side, then they will. And if I want someone to know me as the touring musician or the creative that is in, hot pursuit of the best thing that he can produce, then they will. That will happen.
Yeah.
I think it's, putting a lot of trust, just the way things flow. And I can't sit down with everybody and take up their time like I'm taking up yours and share with them all of this. And I'm exploring it in front of you. I've been interviewed on some radio stations in the past, but this is second podcast I've done.
Okay.
Never really.
What was the first one?
Oh, it was a friend one of my hires actually from South Elgin, Drew. Drew, I think his podcast was Drew Sits With.
Nice. You haven't been on Vinyl Emergency? Vinyl Emergency?
Hope to someday.
Okay.
Jim Hankey.
Put out a little word. Get him on.
I believe as he was getting started now, gosh, a decade ago, I can't remember how long he's been doing this. He's in the 200s of episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Nate Lantham, the drummer from Trouble Hubble. He was one of the first experimental guests.
Nice.
So I remember listening to that back when I was just learning what podcasts even were.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have something. Jim has been a big supporter of Troubled Hubble through the years. We used to play with his band out of Milwaukee.
Awesome. We
got asked by a label to reissue a record coming out this summer as a 20th anniversary of the Lookout Records release. Mm-hmm. And Jim interviewed us all separately and wrote a new set of liner notes.
Oh, that's cool.
For the reissue. So it'll be a gatefold. One side will have the fancy pictures and liner notes that Jim wrote, and then the vinyl will be on the other side. But no, I've never been officially a guest on Vinyl Emergency, but would be.
You've been around it.
And next week, I get to do James Van Osdell, Car Con Carne. He started a podcast, over 10 years ago, where it's all in his car, and they go park outside of a restaurant and order food from the restaurant, bring it back into the car, sit in front of microphones, mouth clicks and all.
I was going to say record themselves eating food. Sounds awesome.
Somehow it has
that's
worked.
Great. I'm going to check that out because I'm fascinated by the experiment of all of it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
James Van Osdell is a radio DJ from Q101 from my youth.
Nice. Yeah.
So he's a legend here in Chicago. And
that's cool.
And he's one of the first real deal podcasters that ever hit my radar. And so those are all my reference points.
I'm learning things. This is great to know.
Cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you spent a lot of time away from Batavia touring, going all over the place, right? What did you learn about yourself that you were able to bring back to Batavia?
That's a cool question that I wasn't ready for. I mean, I like to think that I'm still learning about myself. Going out on the road, those first few years of Troubled Hubble, we would be gone 120 days of the year. Mm-hmm. And what I remember learning about myself was that I could trust in my own intuition, that, if something felt right, more and more I would get the affirmation that I could trust jumping into it, and that if something didn't feel right, that I could trust myself to end it. And so I suppose that touring that much, you are building a relationship with yourself, and just knowing that I would be okay. And maybe that is coming from such a wholesome community and such a lovely hometown and part of the world, that I learned I was really lucky, and that perhaps had a gift that didn't feel comfortable sitting on and not sharing. Maybe like that there is more, there's always more to life than what you think and what you see. There's this word sonder that's from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, and it says that, sonder is the feeling that every person in your life, that or in passing, like, has their own network of family, friends, emotional experiences. And it's just this vast, that's just like the vast matter that we're all a part of. Mm-hmm. And so going out in the world and touring and meeting so many thousands and thousands of people, not necessarily at the shows, but, just getting to be a part of society, of the world,
different cultures,
that there's always somebody that has it worse. There's always somebody that has it better, and that your feelings aren't insignificant, mm-hmm. but you're also not alone.
Yeah.
Bringing that back and keeping that in mind, like, with everything that I do, like, is what I learned about myself, is to just have compassion, never feel entitled to, and also never take what you have for granted, and mm-hmm. And to share what you feel you might have is extra special or a gift, and to not be selfish.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like your answer was as much about what you learned here that you brought into the world as much as it was. It's almost like when you went out into the world, you learned what you learned here. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I definitely, like I said, coming up in this, I wouldn't say super close-knit community, especially, these days as attention spans and distractions, are evolving. But a smaller town, and mm-hmm. going out and seeing bigger towns. And I guess having access to Chicago from here culturally opened up everything I needed through music and mm-hmm. art and people. And I feel fortunate for that. And I've never once taken it for granted. I try to maintain this positive mental attitude for sure, but further to be grateful. And as you get older, and as you experience more loss, and as you change and grief, this is something that's I've only learned in the recent past, is that feeling grateful and maintaining this attitude of gratitude is like the guiding light that pulls you, and is why you put one foot in front of the other. I think. I can't.
For you, for sure.
For me.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I've had and that I will have.
So for me, when I go back to my hometown, there's a inherent duality of feeling. I'm happy to be back, but it's also so my dad died when I was 28. So there's a sad feeling too. You know what I mean? Because you feel the loss really acutely when you go back. You live here, but I'm curious if there is that feeling for you, if there's
I think that because I'm such a devout Batavian, and having lived here, and my family, my parents still being in the same house that they've been in for over 40 years, that had all the extremes, dark times and great times. I associate, some situations with, more depressing subjects than others. And we've even in the restaurant, I've hired and lost people in the 10 years that I've been working here. But yeah, everybody goes through the extremes.
Yeah.
How I said, just feeling grateful for what you have. But I might say that my 10 years or 8 years of living in Washington, and easier access to the darker things to associate, and just being a stranger in a strange land out there. And so I don't feel sheltered here, but I also feel extremely comfortable.
Home. It's home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
It just took 10 minutes for me to explain what being at home
Honestly,
is.
that's my favorite.
Right.
I mean, I love it. Genuinely, it's great. What keeps you up at night?
Oh, I haven't struggled much. I've definitely had periods of my life of feeling especially restless, and I definitely try to avoid that and identify what it is so that I can eradicate it, because I do enjoy sleeping very much.
Yeah. And you don't like being anxious, it sounds like.
Right. I think what keeps me up at night, is I make my own stress chemicals, but if I overdo it on coffee and caffeine,
oh man, relatable.
It'll coffee after 3 o'clock will keep me up at night.
Yeah.
I recently had to move, just kind of suddenly with a 2-week notice that the house I was living in was being sold. So it definitely kept me up at night in thinking of, I guess, general uncertainty can keep me up at night. But
is that part of the restaurant business a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that must be a little stressful.
The day starts usually with, I have anywhere from 20 to 30 people on just my schedule between 2 stores. So my day, and in the 9 years of doing this, I've hired well over 300 people and just all kinds of walks of life and characters and great people and sure not so great people. And I love to lead by example, and that's where I get my best results.
Yeah.
And so if I ever feel, like that is like I'm losing grip of, my ability to lead by example and to inspire people on my schedule, I love hiring people. I have hired people for their first jobs. I've hired people who are retired and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
I care about everyone in the restaurants that I work for. Work itself and the actual functioning and operations of the restaurant, I know everything will be okay, but on a more personal level, I think that if there's Jeff Shelke going into McDonald's over there.
Nice. Classic.
In his sweater vest.
Yeah. That's how you know we're in Batavia.
I think like interpersonal stuff can keep me up at night. If I'm, relationships, things are pretty stable in that part of my life. But if anybody on my schedule is causing me uncertainty, like, is this guy going to show up? And am I waking up at, 8 a.m. to these texts with, people with family emergencies and unavailability, and it's been a lot. I'm good at navigating that, and I love meeting people and hiring new people, and I've got people who've been on my schedule for 6 years, and it's awesome. There isn't any work stress that keeps me up at night. There isn't any band or music or art stress that keeps me up at night. I'm an overthinker for sure, and so I will overthink myself and not get rest. And I'm lucky to be the age that I am and to have kind of perspective on that as well now, and to know if that's happening, and
that's good.
Breathing exercises and stuff. So
to you, what does it mean to belong in Batavia?
What does it mean to belong in Batavia? Just having been here my entire life. My parents first lived in the Green Meadow apartments, and then they both worked their asses off, and we got a little house in the Saratoga neighborhood, and they worked their asses off. And then in '87, we moved over into Harvell Farms, and we were the last house on the block. And there were cornfields right up to our backyard. It's this new development, and now that goes well, to Randall Road and beyond. And I think having the connection to the past makes me feel belonging. I love that Batavia is a little more open-minded for the Tri-Cities, and they've got the Pride celebration next week, and there was always a great sense of community here growing up just through classmates. I'm still with my first grade classmates here working at the restaurant. And this part of the country is just accessible. It's just the middle of, it feels like the center of the world, you know. I'm never losing sight of where it was and how it is now, and knowing that my story and my parents' story is not exclusive to us. Everybody here seemed to, Batavia's got, you know, certainly when I was young, I had this kind of not blue collar, but kind of grit, more grit than its surrounding towns.
Yeah.
Felt good to be a part of that. Like, you can work towards your dreams. And I was never really stifled by anything here in town, only encouraged and inspired. And, you know, grew up skating on the Depot Pond and sledding down the Windmill Hill at Fabian and skating at Funway. Funway used to have a dirt bike track in the back. And like, I was just living in a kind of a fantasy world here and not losing sight of, you know, how fortunate I am to be here and to still be here.
Thanks for listening to Area Code Batavia. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, you should absolutely subscribe to the newsletter. Just click the link in the show notes. Most importantly, if you know someone who would love to hear this podcast, please share it with them. Word of mouth is the best way to grow our community and help more people feel like they belong in Batavia, Illinois. Area Code Batavia is produced by Area Code Audio. It's hosted and produced by me, Richard Clark, with additional production help from Jennifer Clark. Edited and mixed by Matt Linder.